So the goal of most companies is to get big, right? Every company wants to get bigger. There's not a single company in the world that says, hey, I don't ever want to get bigger. Maybe, at any given particular point of time, a company might not want to get big. Maybe the founders want to stabilize, or they're focusing on other things in life and they want to keep the company stable. But very rarely do companies say that I never want to get bigger. And the entire art or science of getting bigger can be called, in short, scaling, right? So in this video, we're going to learn about scaling. We're going to learn what are the roadblocks and challenges to scale, what are the preconditions to scale, and we're going to learn about the two things that companies need to do in order to scale, and then we're going to explore one of those things. So let's get started with this episode. So this episode is called Thinking Scale. When a business is scaling their operations, this means that they are able to handle an increasing number of clients or buyers in a capable, cost-effective manner. So, two things that need to happen. They need to automate cumbersome tasks and create processes for human tasks. And these are the two critical parts to scale something. So, again, I'm going to summarize that. You need to automate or computerize cumbersome tasks, and you need to make set processes for human tasks. So, let me explain both of these. Say you're a company that manufactures phones, right? And in the beginning, maybe you're just manufacturing 5 phones. You're testing things out. So you have somebody who's probably putting the entire thing together, probably ordering the manufacturing or ordering the parts from different places, talking to the manufacturers, getting some test supplies, putting it together manually. I'll give you an example of this, right? So in the early days, if you were to make a smart TV, right? And a smart TV is basically a TV which has some intelligence. You can watch Netflix on it and simple stuff, right? So if you wanted to make something like that, you need to get a TV from some manufacturer. Say you get you get the screen from somewhere, you get the stand from somewhere, and then for the smart part of it, you probably get something called a Raspberry Pi, which is this. Let me just show you what that looks like, right? This is a Raspberry Pi. It's actually a very small computer that you can just plug on, and then you can connect a LAN cable or connect Wi-Fi. So you probably get something like this, right? So let me just go back to presenting. So you put it all together and you do this manually. But you can't do this at scale, right? If you have 100,000 people who come and want to buy your smart TV, you can't manually sit and assemble this TV. So you need a manufacturing line, and you need to automate the process of placing the Raspberry Pi inside the TV at a particular location. So maybe it's the top right, maybe it's somewhere at the bottom, and you need some device to do this. You need maybe a robotic arm to put it in, right? And this is how cars are manufactured, right? Cars are manufactured at scale exactly the same way, but they still have some human parts. For example, if the car is being painted, maybe that's the fourth part or the fourth phase of a car going through its manufacturing line, a human needs to aim the spray paint at a particular part, and then the machine takes over. So it's not a completely automated process. It's a part human, part robotic process. But the general idea is that you have to automate a lot of the process if you want to hit scale. Otherwise, you're going to spend a lot of time having humans do a lot of things. And the problem with having humans do a lot of things at scale is that humans make mistakes. We as human beings, we're not efficient. And the ideal scalable business, like the unlimited scalable business, has almost no humans involved. That's why companies like Facebook or Snapchat, they scale so rapidly because they don't need so many humans. In fact, they need close to 0 humans. Facebook needs humans only for things like moderation or making sure, if an ad gets reported, then taking it down. So it doesn't need too many humans. And that's one of the cool parts about scale, right? If you don't have too many humans involved, but you're still selling out a product, then you can get really, really, really big. The problem with humans is we make errors. And if you have humans and if it's unavoidable, then you need to have set processes for them, right? Because sometimes humans will leave. Somebody wants to leave their job. You need to get somebody else in, and that person needs to perform as well or in the same way as the previous guy. So you need to have a set process, and then you need to have quality assurance, right? You need to make sure that if there is a screw up, somebody handles it, or there's a way to check what somebody's doing. My co-founder Shashank, he uses the word maker checker a lot, which means somebody makes something and then there's somebody else that checks it, right? To make sure the quality is straight or the quality is good. At the end of the day, you're just making sure that things work well at scale. So there are some factors that are needed before a business considers scaling. And the first one is a product that consumers are willing to pay for, right? If you don't have consumers that are willing to pay for something, no point scaling. You're just wasting money and time. You need a high net promoter score. And, in the product section of this entire course, you'll understand what a net promoter score is, which is basically how likely are people to recommend this product to another person. You need predictable revenue. You need something that, at 500 customers, you're making X. At 10,000 customers, you'll be making, some number. And the thing is, when you scale, costs go down. And I'll come to that in a bit. The next thing is you need ideally subscription services. You can't have, services where, there's custom pricing for every single person. So you can't go to one person and say, hey, this costs $100,000. And then you go to another person and say, hey, this only costs you 50,000 rupees because we'll only do some of this for you, right? If you're doing anything manually, then it's not easily scalable, which is why subscription services like Netflix, are scale much better than, if you're making a video for another person custom made, right? That doesn't make sense. You need high customer retention rates. If your software services, especially, the opposite of a high customer retention rate is a high churn rate. And churn basically means what percentage of your customer base is leaving, right? Has stopped paying. And obviously, we learn more about this in the product section of Meta. So make sure you go check that out. And then, a lot of people have multiple tiers of products. So you have, something for guys who have deep pockets. You have something for people who, want something inexpensive. So you're basically capturing a larger section of the market because otherwise there simply isn't a big enough market for you to hit scale. To give you an example, Apple has, premium products. That's their iPhone X currently. And then, they have cheaper products, iPhone C, for example, for people who, have shallower pockets. If a company increases their revenue, but increases their costs at the same time or at the same rate, then that business is not efficiently scaling. So if you're selling 500 of something and each of those products costs you X to manufacture, when you're manufacturing 20,000 of those products, each product shouldn't cost you X. It should cost you much lesser than X. Because at the end of the day, when you order a minimum quantity or when you're ordering big quantities of something, the individual costs go down, right? I'll give you the example of t-shirts because I know that well. When you make a t-shirt, you need a screen for the t-shirt, right? For a particular design, you need a screen. So if I'm making a design with, say, my face on it, then I need a screen with my face cut out of it, right? And that screen has a cost to manufacture, right? Maybe 10,000 rupees or 15,000 rupees or something like that. And what happens is when you're printing just 5 of those t-shirts, the price of each, the bare material may be 100 rupees or 200 rupees. And then you have the screen and then you add up those costs and divide it by the number of t-shirts that you're printing. So if you're only printing 5 t-shirts, the cost of the screen is so high that you'll end up paying a lot per t-shirt. But if you're printing a million t-shirts with the same screen, then the cost of the screen is negligible. And that's how scale works for most physical products, right? If you're manufacturing a lot of them, it's easier for you to kind of the cost of production of each product goes down because a lot of the high individual costs are averaged out. Cool. So the Net Promoter Score, it measures customer experience. We go through this in depth in the product section of Meta. It answers the question, how likely is it that you would recommend a brand to a friend or colleague? There are 3 different sections. If somebody scores, if somebody says, I'm likely to share or your product or service with my friends, the promoters, if people are like, maybe I'll share, maybe I won't share, they're unenthusiastic, that they're passives, and then detractors who hate your product or who don't like your product, and those are the guys you need to fix ASAP. So, of course, when you do the product section, you learn this better. Then, let's talk about automation, right? And for a lot of you haven't seen automation live, right? You've heard of it, you've seen it with robots, but you don't know how it works with software tools. And I want to show you a tool called Zapier that shows you automation live. An interesting story is that I work with a ton of lawyers, right? One of the products we invested in is an equity management tool known as Illune. And to build this tool, we had to work very closely with some of the best lawyers in the country. In fact, we work with the same lawyers that work with Sequoia Capital, right? Which is a big deal. And a lot of their work is repetitive, right? They do a lot of fill in the blanks work. So when they do a contract or they do a shareholders agreement like we just learned, they have to fill in a lot of blanks. So there's this template and then they say, okay, put the person's name, put the number of shares the person owns, all of that in. That's their job, right? And when I introduced them to Zapier, and this was a year and a half ago, their minds were blown. And they said, look, I have like 5 people in the office that actually sit and do this. And because you guys have this, or I've just seen Zapier, I can get rid of this, right? So Zapier is a wonderful tool because it teaches you the power of automation without learning to write code, right? So in this video, I'm going to simulate what happens when an employee comes in and they fill in the form, maybe to get hired, and then I get an email and Shashank is CC'd. So I'm just going to show you an example of this, and we're going to do it live so you get the point. Cool. So I'm just going to go to zapier.com. And again, Zapier is free for a lot of things. You only have to pay if you want something very specific, or if you want to run a lot of Zapiers or Zaps, they're called. So I'm going to make a Zap. Right? And a Zap basically connects many different application programmer interfaces or APIs. So you have, a bunch of different tools that exist on the internet, maybe Instagram, maybe, Google Form, maybe Google Docs, and you want to connect them in some way, right? So Zapier allows you to do that. To give you an example, there are a lot of tools out there that allow you to post on Instagram at a particular time. A tool like Zapier, if you're smart enough, you can do it for practically free. So let me show you, right? I'm just going to make a Zap. Again, these patterns on Zapier are called Zaps. Now, in Zapier, you have a trigger event or something that triggers a Zap, and then you have an action, something that happens because of the trigger. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to make a simple form, right, where a potential employee or somebody who wants to work at Avalon can just put in their name, their cost to company, which is their salary, and what role they want to kind of work with. And this is just a simple form, right? Like what role they want to do. And what happens when this form is submitted is that it sends me an email and CC Shashank and says, hey, here are the details of this person who might want to work for us. So it's like a simple, recruitment dashboard kind of form, except I get it over email. And what we're going to do is, you can do a lot of stuff with this, but I'm just going to show you the simple point. So I'm going to set up a trigger. And before I set up a trigger, I'm going to create a Google form. So I'm going to open a new tab. I'm going to say google.com/forms. And I'm going to create a new blank form. Right? I'm just going to call it employment form number 1, just putting a number there. I'm going to say, what is your name? Right? And let's do a short answer. That's fine. I'm going to add a question. I'm going to say, what role do you want to do? Let's give them some options. Let's do multiple choice. So maybe web developer. We're hiring for web developers. Graphic designer. By the way, we're hiring for all of these roles. So, just shameless plug. Web, graphic, and maybe, we can have an accountant, right? I'm going to add another question, which is, what salary do you want? And we'll have a short answer here, right? So that's it. I'm going to make a simple form. Now, in Google Forms, you can actually create an Excel or a Google Doc sheet for this entire list of responses that this form will get. So you can just click on responses, and I'm going to create a new Google Docs spreadsheet. I'm just going to call this employment form response. I'm just going to call it first employment form responses, right? I'm going to create a spreadsheet. It gets created automatically. And as you can see, the titles are, what is your name? What role do you want to work at? What salary do you want? So this is the cool part, right? It automatically creates this. And if you haven't used Google Forms or Google Docs or Google Sheets, I would suggest looking up a tutorial, because this is very important for collaborative business, especially today. And if you're still stuck using Excel, my suggestion to you would be to upgrade, right? It's just my suggestion. You don't have to do it. All right, so I'm just gonna go to Zapier. Now I'm going to show you how to set up a trigger. So I'm going to set up a Google form. I'm going to say when a new response in spreadsheet. Okay. I'm going to select Google Forms from varun@avalonlabs.co, which is my email. You just have to set it up. And I added this an hour ago. It's very easy. You just press the connect account button. And I'm going to select a spreadsheet and employment form. Let's just see. Let's refresh. I want to refresh because I've done this a few times. First employment form responses. That's what we want. First employment form responses. And the worksheet. Let's just choose the first worksheet, right? Sheet 1, which just shows up as 1. and then I'm going to continue. Okay, so it's just, they're looking for a sample. I'm going to skip this step. We don't need to do this. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an action step. An action step basically means when the trigger happens, what is the action that happens? And I'm going to create an action here. What I'm going to do is I am going to send an email, right? I'm going to send an email. I'm going to do that. And I'm going to send it, I'm going to send it to myself from my own account. I'm going to choose my own account. Right? So let me just continue. And here's the cool thing, right? As you can see here, all of the editable parts of Gmail are presented to you. That's the awesome thing about Zapier, right? This is all stuff that a human would enter. So I'm just going to say, send it to me, labs.co, CC Shashank, right? We don't need all this. We'll just say subject, new employment response received. I'm going to say, well, name of person, and I can click this button and insert a field. So for example, the field pull was, what role do you want to do? And as you can see here, you can see in the questions, what role do you want to do, right? I just pulled that. And let's just say role, this is role, right? Role of person. Put that on the next line. Name of person, let's pull out the name. I think it's, what is your name? And what salary do you want? Okay, sorry, salary of person, right? And I can just say, what salary do you want, right? So this is just data that's been pulled in. It'll happen automatically. It'll send this. And what you can do is you can be smarter, right? You can actually even use Zapier to make a PDF out of this. And you can make a cool looking PDF with your logo on it, and you can attach it over email and send it across. So sometimes we do this, right? If you're sending out an employment contract, I just have this link on my desktop where I can pull out a Google form, or just enter some details about the person, and the person gets an employment contract instead of somebody manually opening, Word or Google Docs and entering all this data in. This is just, it's instant, right? And I can do it without anybody's help. So I'm just going to continue, right? So I'm just going to skip the test and I'm going to finish, right? I'm just going to call this Zap1, and I'm going to turn it on. Every 15 minutes, a response is checked for. And one of the cool parts of this is that if you pay for Zapier, you can get this done much faster. And so 15 minutes, it can check every 30 seconds or 1 minute or something like that, right? So my Zapier is on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to test it. So I'm going to go to this form. I'm just going to send this form to myself. I'm going to copy the link, just copy it, open it in a new tab. I'm going to say my name is, Varun Maya the first. Just 4 lakhs. Actually, I'm more expensive than that. 4.1 lakh. Okay. Just submit it, and my response has been recorded, which means it'll show up here first. And as you can see, my data is here. I want to let you know why this kind of automation is very important, right? So I've always had an assistant, especially after my second or third year working at JobsBio. I had an assistant because I just realized that an assistant saves me a lot of time. So if I want to send an employment form, or if I want to send somebody a contract, I would literally call my assistant, tell that person all these details, send this person a contract with this price, doing this. And, my assistant would, they do a good job, but at the end of the day, they're humans, right? So they make mistakes. And more importantly, they might send the contract 2 days later, or 3 days later. And there was always some issue with the other, or, the CTC would be wrong, which is the salary that would be wrong, or some name issues, and we'd have to go back and forth. These days, what I started doing is I've started realizing that I can use Zapier to do all of this. So I just create my employment forms myself, or now what we do is I just make the recruitment team make their employment forms themselves, using Zapier without making any mistakes. In the future, I totally see me just talking to Alexa and saying, Amazon Echo and just saying, look, Alexa, I need an employment form created for this person with this CTC starting at this date for this role. And Alexa would just pull out all that data, send it all to Zapier, and Zapier would send an email with a PDF attached to the person saying, here's your employment contract. In that entire process, I would have eliminated the role of my assistant. So a lot of these clerical data entry, one app to another app people, and there are, a lot of India does this, right? A lot of India does this, which they're taking data from one place, translating it, putting it into another place, or sending that data across. Those roles are dead, right? And that's my biggest, it's not my issue with automation. It's a power that automation gives you, but it also takes away from a lot of what a lot of humans do, which is why if you don't understand this, you're always going to do things slowly. I am much faster on the computer or in real life than an actual person because I have a lot of these things that have already been built up for business. So I have, about 20, 25 different things that speed up my workflow, like crazy fast, and allow me to skip having humans in it. For example, if I wanted to make a member-only subscription site, I would use a combination of two tools that I've been using for a long time. And these use a lot of APIs, third-party APIs to get it across. Whereas another person would build it over 6 months, 7 months, what I would take 3 days to do, right? So it's exponential how fast you can get if you know how to use tools like Zapier. All right, so let's just see if my Zap has come in. So as you can see, a new employment response was received with the name or the details from the first response that we put in, Varun Maya the first. And that's that, right? Like at the end of the day, you have to understand that automation is awesome and it's a power. And if you don't learn it, somebody else will, and they're going to just replace you. So you either be the person that uses these robots, and these are like, this is software in cold storage, right? It's running on some machine somewhere, which you can use, you can leverage this. And if you don't, somebody else will and replace you. So at the end of the day, it's an eat or be eaten world. And my job is to give you the tools and the prowess to be a one-man unstoppable army. And all of this speeds you up, right? One of my nicknames when I used to game a lot, and even now when I do business, is the Lightning Emperor. And the reason for that is, I'm just very fast at what I do. And I have all these workflows prepared. It's just, I seem to have so much time on my hands because a lot of what I do is super fast, right? Because I have all of this. And if I didn't have all of this, I probably have created in 1 year what another person creates in 1 year. But today, I create in 1 year what another person can create in 4 or 5, simply because I speed up everything and I don't have middlemen, right? If I still relied on other people to send out things like employment contracts, I'd always be, my bottleneck would be another person. And I try to avoid having other people as my bottlenecks. Even though we run a 50-man company, I try to keep it asynchronous. What I do should be very separate from what the other people do. And when a person joins Avalon, we give them training on a lot of stuff, including Zapier is just one of the tools we use for automation, but I give them training on all of it. And, it just speeds them up. We're just fast, right? So anyway, learn to be faster. That's it for this video. Catch you on the next.